Hi everyone, it's Michelle from Scrap Secrets and I'm here with another Sketch Sunday video. I know that it's Monday. Cricut Design Space was supposed to be down all day today, so I needed to work on stuff for a shower. So I did that last night and then I figured I'd do this today. So just want to show you guys the card sketch real quick. Again, it comes from the My Favorite Things blog. Let's see if I can get this for you. There you go. I will put the sketch up on my blog post, and I will also put the link to it down in the more information. So instead of doing step by step, I'm going to try the voiceover thing. So here you go, you're going to see just the steps and I will explain it in my voiceover. To start off the card, the first thing that I did was I ran a piece of watercolor paper through my Cut-O-Bug. The watercolor paper that I used is the Canson Extra Large watercolor paper that I have. And I couldn't find the circle die, so I used the largest scallop circle that I had. So I ran that through the Cut-O-Bug with the Genius platform, and then I removed it so that I could get the piece out to stamp on. The stamp set that I chose was the My Favorite Things DG Sweet on You stamp set, and I chose the main image from that. It's a little girl with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and she has a little teddy bear. So I wanted to stamp the image in My Favorite Things Hybrid ink. It's a black licorice ink. The reason that I wanted to do this is because I'm going to be watercoloring on the piece. So I wanted to use an ink that won't run with colors. So I inked up the stamp, and then I'm going to, that's the My Favorite Things Hybrid ink, and I'm going to stamp it down onto the watercolor piece. I'm using the Fiskars stamp press there, so it's real good to use with larger images because you can get a good impression. You can run your hands over it and the image comes out nice and crisp and clean. So there's the stamped image. This is what it looks like. And the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to start the card base. I chose a 5x7 card base. It was pre-folded ones. And I'm going to get ready to prep the background. So I have this purple argyle paper that I've had for a while that I thought would look nice in the background. And here I'm just trying to figure out what size I'm going to cut the piece to. Since the card's a 5x7, I wanted to cut it a little bit smaller than the front of the card. So I ended up cutting the piece down. The first one is, I believe, 5.5 inches. It's down to 5.5 inches. Yes. Or I'm sorry, 4.5 inches because the card base is 5x7. So cut it at 4.5. And then turn the cardstock around and cut it at 6.5. Because in the original card design, there's also a little strip of white that was on the side of the card design, and instead of leaving it white, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So there's the card front, and that's what it looks like on the card base. So get it all lined up and just wanted to make sure that it looks okay. So I found a piece of scrap cardstock that was just lying on my desk, and it was actually the perfect width for the card. But since the card base was white, I wanted to do a little bit something different. So I took some of the Hero Arts Shadow ink, and I'm just trying to find a piece of scratch cardstock. And one of the neat things about the inks is you can actually dye a piece of paper to make it look the same color. So I'm just running the ink pad along the scrap paper to turn it the shade of purple that I want. You can go over it as many times as you want. And Hero Arts shadow inks will go on splotchy looking, but if you give it enough time to dry, it will dry solid, not splotchy looking. So that was the color that I was going for, and I believe this is the grape color. Let's see in 1 second. It's grape juice mid-tone shadow ink. So that was the color that I used, and then I wanted to line it up with the piece of paper just to make sure that it was the right size. The next thing that I did was cut down the inked piece that I had just finished to match the same size as the scrapbook paper that I had cut down for the front of the card. So I cut it down so that it was 6.5 inches and it would fit nicely onto the side of the card. So after I cut it down, I just lined it up with the scrapbook paper just to make sure that it was the right size, because sometimes it's a little bit off. I wanted to make sure, and it's just about right. So I decided to get my ATG gun out, which hasn't been working correctly, so I'm going to fast forward through this because every time I use the ATG gun, I have to redo the tape in there. Now that I had the tape on all of the pieces, I tried to attach the two layers together, and I just used my quick stick to pick the layers up. And I realized that the inked up piece was a little bit longer than this scrapbook paper, so I just took my scissors and trimmed off the little edge so that they would be the exact same size. And then I would be able to put them down on my card base. But they weren't staying attached, so I decided to take the inked piece first and put that on the paper. I put a little bit of a border around all three sides of it. And then I had to straighten it up. It didn't go on straight the first time, so I had to adjust it. And then after that was down in place, I took the patterned paper and placed it over top of the inked up piece so that it would create the front of my card base. And once that was done, I smoothed it onto the front, and then the card base was done for right now, and I put it to the side so that I could get ready to start watercoloring my piece. So here's the piece. And I'm going to fast forward through the watercoloring because there's a lot of it, but I used distress inks, and the colors I used are going to be shown on the screen as they're being used. Now that the watercoloring was all done, I needed to choose a sentiment, and I chose the My Favorite Things, You Make My Day sentiment set, and the sentiment, You Smile, I Smile. So for the sentiment to sit on, I cut down a piece of that same watercolor paper to 1 inch by 3 inches, and I wanted to use the same My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink to stamp the sentiment, and there it is. Oh, before I did anything with the sentiment, I wanted to tape the main image onto the front of the card. So there it is. And then I wanted to do some watercoloring over the sentiment. So I picked Seedless Preserves Distress ink, and I just went over the entire front of it just to give it a little bit of color. It stood out too much if it wasn't colored in, so that's what I wanted to do. I went over it several times with the Seedless Preserves to try to get, I didn't want it all uniform, so here I am, I'm taking some water from the water bowl and splashing it on and then sopping up some of the water, and it was a little bit too wet, so I decided to take my heat gun and use the heat gun to heat up the sentiment to dry it. So I put a couple more droplets of water on it and didn't like the way it looked, so I went back with my brush and put some water droplets over top of it, just flinging some water on there because Distress ink reactivates with water, so it gives it a really different look. So after cleaning my work surface, and that is a non-stick craft mat if you guys aren't sure what I've been using this entire time to watercolor on. So the last thing that I did was I took my ATG gun and glued the sentiment, put it down onto the front of my card under the main image. Instead of a banner, I did that. And the card is done. And here's what it looks like. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!